Hi everybody, I'm Doug Leighton, Panasonic. So welcome to the new VariCam, and wow, this was a long time coming. It was just truly a labor of love in the last number of years, kind of a skunk works for a while, and then eventually we started to hear rumors from Japan that this was going to happen. And if you're going to come into the marketplace and you're going to come in this late with a camera that is going to compete with other cameras that are well established and very populated throughout the industry, this thing's better stand up on its own and do a lot of cool things. And of course, we asked them to do a lot of cool things, and they interviewed a lot of people like yourselves before making the initial design criterias. But after it was all said and done, the camera comes out, we get the first working models. The prototypes were a little shaky, but nevertheless, you're going to see a reel that was shot on a prototype camera. And considering it was that, the reel came out incredible. You'll see, I'll let you be the judge. So there's two things that are really important about this camera. But before we get to those little important features, what's really important is, people have asked us, so whose chip did you buy? Well, we have this chip factory, so we thought, well, let's just do our own chip because we can do that, number one. And number two, we wanted to have a chip that would, talking about the imager, the Super 35 size imager with a overscan. And so we did our own, and that proved out to be one of the best things that we did with putting this camera together. And there's another chip that's really critical in the camera that's on the other side of things. So we have this great imaging chip, and then we have a chip that does all the recording. And that chip allows us to have a variety of performance specs going on that are just as excellent as you could imagine them to be. So what are we showing here? We got a camera that's two parts. There's a camera, comes apart, it splits in two. And why does it do that? Because there are two reasons it does it. One, because we wanted the camera to be able to lighten up if we wanted to take half of it and put it out on the end of a jib arm or a crane or something else where it didn't have a lot of space to house itself. And the other reason is because there's a second part of this camera. It's called the VariCam HS, and that's a 2/3 inch camera. That camera runs to 240 frames, which kind of pales 120 frames in 4K that the VariCam 35 does, but that's another discussion. So you could own two different heads and use the same recording module and come out ahead in that respect. And then when you first go to the camera and you turn it on, and you're seeing picture in less than 6 seconds, and the camera's fully booted in 18 seconds, you know that there's a lot of horsepower going on to allow that to happen. And that's when you're out on set, you're in production, and people are concerned about time, we're going to help that be a better story. 85 watts, that's not too outrageous. I mean, it would be if you had a battery on it and you're out in the middle of nowhere shooting some wildlife stuff. But for what this camera does and the amount of recording performance and processing performance that it does, it's not outrageous. And 12 pounds, you'll feel what 12 pounds is like. In about half hour, it becomes 18 pounds. But overall, it's not a bad weight. So next slide. So we want to be able to control a camera. And so how are we going to do that? We're going to put a GUI in there, then this GUI is going to be super universal and have all kinds of menu structures to it and ability to get to things that you need in a hurry. And not only that, but you can put it on the other side of the camera so the camera assistant can have that in his access, or move it anywhere you want to. But by the way, going back to the cameras splitting apart, you can go about 100 feet in distance between the head and the processing recording section. Like the fact having these programmable user buttons. These are buttons that we all need, so you can program one for color bars, really exciting stuff, or you could do it for 15 to 17 other different functions. And as you continue to program those functions go away, so you don't duplicate any of that. So you could program one on the opposite side of the camera, say number 4, so your camera system can hit record and watch that happen. Okay, so a great little GUI, plugs in hot, by the way. You don't have to turn the camera off to move it from one side to the other. Next slide. So frame rates, this is great. We can go from 1 to 120 frames a second in full 4K. Okay, so recording in 4K, that's impressive. That's a lot of bandwidth, a lot of bit rate, but it does it faithfully. And whilst we recognize that the bulk of the time people are going to be recording 23.98, you have that ability to record at the higher speeds and then, of course, slow them down to get that nice effect. So when we designed this chip, we thought it'd be interesting to have two native exposure index ISO ASA ratings that come out of the chip. And one of them is 800, so conventional stuff. You got lots of light, life is good, record at 800. But what if you need to increase that? Essentially, you're adding gain. In any camera, you're adding gain. So what they did is they built a second output out of each pixel, and that second output is 5,000 exposure index rating. And what's the penalty there? Well, you're going to see a demonstration tonight. Not much. In measurement terms, it's a dB. And I'm not going to go into that because you'll see that go into detail later. A filter wheel, hey, that's novel on a big ship camera, so it's an accurate filter wheel. And everything in the optical path from the camera back through is, of course, finely tuned and optimized for best resolution and best, cut out those IR and UV problems. And then we added some switches on the side that you can't quite see, but they're right behind that record button in conventional place that we all know from our production and ENG type cameras. So exposure index and white balance and that sort of thing. So those little handy switches are there. And then, of course, if you're going to record in 4K, you still need to monitor on something, and you could monitor in 4K as witnessed by the two monitors out in front, or you could just go ahead and just monitor in camera. So you have lots of options, ins and outs, timecode, Genlock, all that usual stuff. Next slide. Recording mediums. So what does the camera record on? It records on what we call Express P2 card. So Express P2 card is just a bigger, faster, badder, more expensive version than the conventional P2 card, which has certain limitations that would certainly not allow for 4K, but this one does. This one thinks it's a pretty high-powered computer. It's got RAID 5 in it. It's got checksums going on. We recognize that this card has to be camera master performance. It shall not, unallowed to fail. And the little card in the middle looks like pretty large in this slide, but actually it's the size of an SD card. In fact, it is that same size, but it's got a second row of contacts, and it can record up to 200 megabits a second. And what it records, so the big card records 4K, and that's in either format, 4096 or 3048. And so it records in either one of the 2K or in standard HD. So you get that. And also on that little SD card, the micro P2 card rather, you get a proxy signal. So now you've recorded 3 signals at the same time in the camera. And if you add the codecs to the back of the camera, it's a dedicated unit that plugs directly in. Now you can record at the same time raw signals. So you have all those 4 options of recording on set. Next slide. And reading. And we'll not get into the particular speed of this, but it's really fast and super accurate. So we have this little card reader. It's a USB 3 port coming out, and plug in the 4K card and the 256 gigs, and you're good to go. Next slide. We have friends in the industry. We have partners, these guys, and more. So everything that we do in terms of how we approach the workflow, how we get the content out of the camera, how we interface with other companies, we talk to all these people. We have a communication link going with them. We have partnerships with them, and they're all on board. So that can, more on that later. Let's watch the sizzle reel and see what you think. I think you'll enjoy this.